Hello, and welcome back to another episode of My Grocery Adventure. My name is Carly, and this podcast is for anybody who wants to make an impact in this world. You want to exchange your time and energy on this planet for making it a better place. That's really what we're here to talk about in the overarching arc of all of these episodes. Today, we are joined by Zachary Page, and he is going to start at the beginning with his story and walk us forward as far as all of the different ways that our path can evolve and blend one chapter into the next, into the next. They tend to build. Sometimes we take random hairpin left turns. It's all good. Yeah, we're gonna share some stories. And with that, Zachary, do you prefer Zach? Zachary? Which is your
Zachary's
go-to?
great. Yeah.
Zachary's great. Okay. Well, Zachary, how about we start with where were you born? Where'd you grow up? What was that like? Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, I was born in East Northport, Long Island, in the suburbs, and it was a great town and place to grow up. Had a lot of love in the household and with both my parents and the schools that I were able to go to had just a great amount of opportunity. So yeah, had a great childhood there.
I would say probably the most urban upbringing of any that we've heard on the podcast so far. Did you have a
Yeah.
sense of the difference between urban and rural, or did you have like the city was like kind of all you knew at that point?
Yeah, so the way Long Island structured in the 90s when I grew up was pretty much a never-ending suburbia. So you're on a road from one town to another, and there's just stores on those roads. So um, after getting to a more rural environment, just realizing there are actually roads in between the towns where there's no towns and no stores,
The
which was a
concept.
different experience. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
that's
yeah, so then that's a little different than like a bigger city. I mean, some of the towns would be considered a village, and Long Island would be like 50, 60,000 people butted up against another town of 50, 60,000. So, I mean, those are considered like bigger cities out in rural landscape. Um, but then what we would consider the city, New York City, obviously is a few million. So, yeah, a little bit of a difference there. And then when I went to uh, college at SUNY Purchase, it was a little bit more rural, but I really didn't get that experience of being out in rural America until getting out to Minnesota.
yeah. And I want to hear more about like the culture shock of all of that, but first I'd love to hear more about like growing up. How far away were you from New York City and like how often would you say you went there?
Yeah, it's pretty much about an hour. So an hour drive or an hour train ride, and we are pretty close to the train.
And what would you go into the city for?
Oh, culture, cultural activities like Broadway shows, art, music, growing up, like you want to see a band that's coming into town, you might hear that they're coming into New York City. So bringing a few friends, going on the train. It's a fun time.
Yeah. Were your parents like deliberately exposing you to culture to take, they were into that kind of thing, so they took you to things like that?
Yeah, yeah, that happened too. And then also with the school that I went to, we like took trips into the city. I remember a music class went in to see a performance of La Boheme, the opera, and we would go in every so often. And
Oh,
also my mom's mom, after 65, she moved into the Upper West Side and started a whole new life up there for another 31 years before she passed a few years ago. And that was like absolutely amazing to have a really close family member living in New York City to visit and stay with. And she was amazing, and always was up on, all the new exhibits at the Met and all the museums and things going on. So whenever we come in, she'd have this list of ideas for us to do.
Like I feel like your upbringing is just so the exact opposite of mine personally, but really just like all the guests that we've heard of so far, they're like, I went to school in a cornfield with six other people. And like you're like, I went to the opera on my school field trip. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like how okay, so our last guest, Dan Nagengast, he talked about like one of the main things that he felt growing up in rural Nebraska was I want to become worldly.
Mm,
And it truly sounds like, I mean, your world was just so huge and so multicultural from such an early time in your life. And like almost like you just wouldn't have even known anything else.
right. Yeah, that's the thing. You don't really know anything else. You just kind of assume when you're young, you don't really know all the experiences of people. And there weren't a lot of people like coming into um my town that were from rural America. Like maybe they would be, a few towns over, but so and then being on an island and then being yeah, pretty much yeah, far away in some ways from getting out there. I mean, it's kind of hard to get out. I mean, as a teenager or growing up in high school, like to get out past the metropolis, get out past New York City and Philadelphia, and then getting out into rural like Pennsylvania or New York or something. That would be like probably a 3 or 4 hour drive just to get out into rural America because it's maybe an hour to Manhattan, an hour to get through Manhattan, and then another hour or two just to get out into the country. So I honestly didn't really experience anything rural until um, college.
That's that's just so wild because like I think most of us that have been on the podcast and maybe the ones listening, I don't know, I'd love to hear in the comments about like it was like a 4 hour drive to get to a city. You know what I mean? Like the exact opposite of like you could drive for hours and like only be in the part where there's no stores, there's no anything. So, and you know now, obviously where you live now is probably a lot more like that, where really spread
Yeah.
out, really open space.
Yeah, and then like yeah, on top of like not having the means or the car or whatnot to get out into rural America, the other, obvious thing of like destination, like where, the
Yeah.
destinations are within a city,
Mm.
particularly if you're already in that area. So I remember very particularly in college, the first time I really got out was a bluegrass festival and like kind of like a very small town area and just looking at the stars and thinking, wow, I'm kind of out in the country right now. This is awesome.
Do you see
And then
stars
yeah,
like in New York? I mean, I've honestly never been there. So, can you
yeah, no, you could
see?
see some. I mean, yeah, some light pollution. But yeah, just being out in that experience in the Bluegrass Festival, and then also years later, working on farms in Vermont, kind of getting that experience a little bit too, and being attracted to being closer to nature.
Mm. Is I was gonna ask, like, is that why you prefer rural now? Because growing up with access to like all of that culture, all of those amenities, all of those like just different things going on, um, I you hear a lot of stories about people leaving rural to like go to the city and you migrated the other way. And so like why leave behind the city? Why go to college in a more rural place? Why settle in, Northwest Minnesota or wherever it is that you are?
Yeah, I think it's something like deep inside that maybe no matter what, I'd kind of be doing something along the lines of what I'm doing now in terms of sustainable food systems and stuff. Because I remember thinking those thoughts like when I was really young, like where does our food come from? Like going back to like grocery too, of just like I would always go with my dad to the grocery store and it was like kind of our thing. Um, and it was called Food Town. And yeah, I remember thinking those thoughts, even when I was a very young kid of I think having the curiosity of wanting to know more about where these food items were grown and what nature was all about. And so I think that kind of built over time. So maybe if I got some of that answered early on, I wouldn't have such bigger questions later on. But, and maybe that, kind of determines part of my um, later years work. But um, yeah, I think it's definitely a part of it. But I think also it was like always an interest.
Do you remember like what sparked that curiosity? Like what sparked those questions of where does our food come from? Because again, you hear the joke of like the kids in the city, they're like, it comes from the grocery store. Like milk
Yeah.
comes from the grocery store, the dairy section at the grocery store, that's about as specific as they can get. Do you know like what opened you up into even wondering about that?
I think my parents were always like encouraging like for us, me and my brother to ask questions and that's part of it. And then another part being um exposed to some documentaries like reading Michael Pollan, watching Food Inc. and some uh um questioning of the food system in the stage of my life that, in college when you're questioning everything, it might inspire a person to figure out those answers on their own. And then I had a friend or two that were working on organic farms in Pennsylvania. So then getting more experience to rural, getting more experience to back to the land stuff, talking with people that experienced the real back to land movement in the 60s, and kind of putting those dots together on the history of food, the history of the food system in the US, where things are going, and then what, a young person or a younger person could do about it and continue to learn.
Yeah. Do your parents like showed you documentaries? Or like how did you get a hold of like watching documentaries as a kid?
Um, and that was probably more about like sharing things along colleagues and friends in college.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And what did you major in college and how did you choose that?
I was always pretty good at music, so it was kind of like a default. Um, like playing clarinet and doing composition courses and being um well versed and enjoying that. So I went to school for music composition at Purchase College.
What does that kind of a degree consist of? Um, I have
It
no
would
clue.
allow like a person to like compose music for like films and orchestras and basically orchestrate anything. So along the lines of commercials or um, yeah, anything you could think of that someone would write music for, like
Hmm.
podcasts, commercials, films, music. Movies. Yeah,
Yeah. So have you like written music for things? Did you use your degree or did you do any of it while
yeah.
you were
I
there?
was involved with some projects in Brooklyn when I post college, and I was also teaching music. Um, but yeah, I just didn't love living in that area, so I was kind of looking for a way out. And yeah, after college, I kind of was exploring work on organic farms during the summers until I eventually came to Minnesota.
Yeah. And the work on the organic farms, like you said, you had a couple friends who worked on the organic farms. Is that how you got hooked up with it, or was it something different?
Yeah, so yeah, I visited my friends in Aaronsburg, Pennsylvania, which is pretty out there. It's like in Penns Valley, beautiful area. And yeah, going out there and hanging with the farmer and just seemed right, it just felt like this is kind of, I remember this very specific moment where I kind of turned to the farmer there and said, I think I want to do this with my life. And he was kind of looked at me, he was like, oh yeah. And you kind of have those moments throughout life where you don't know if you want to do something or not, and maybe say it out loud, but kind of remember it's a little bit of weight behind that one in
Yeah.
particular, and thinking like, I think I probably am gonna do this.
Yeah. What does that feel like? Like what did you recognize that had you so sure?
Oh, just everything like the sound. As a part of my music composition interests, I was recording found sounds. So I was like recording the pigs and the wind and
Never even
the
heard that.
chickens and
Found
yeah.
sound.
So
Okay.
found sound, yeah. It's a type of, I mean, it's just a label of, sound basically.
Yeah.
And people use sound in music all the time, but sometimes they call it Foley if it's like in a movie, like a door slamming. And there's like databases of tens of thousands of these kinds of sounds that you would get access to, but you could also create your own library of sorts of sounds. And
Mm.
that's kind of what I was doing, creating ambient music with found sounds. So whether it just be like rain on a roof or some pigs eating or some chickens walking around or some goats, um, I would just collect all those sounds and then create some music on top of it and kind of layer it together. But
And this is like what you did just for fun, just to like entertain yourself?
and also part of that music degree and stuff.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. So and maybe that was a part of what I loved about being out in nature, just those kinds of sounds and sensory experiences. And um, I think beyond that, though, just feeling more connected to the earth and having this space to be able to breathe a little easier, literally. I was a smoker for a while, and I think that was a really great way for me to quit smoking and be in the trees and heal. And also, yeah, just connect with people in a slightly slower or, I don't know, more meaningful way of interacting with our food system. And yeah, kind of answering all those questions that I had when I was younger about where things came from, because it was right in front of us.
Yeah. I'm curious, how do you think being in nature helped you quit smoking? Was that the connection you made?
Yeah, that was maybe just formulated in my head of just like this is how I could quit, just like breathing fresher air than, the air of the polluted Brooklyn streets. So it felt easier for me to continue quitting smoking in an environment that was um not polluted.
That's a really interesting idea. And do you think that it had anything to do with, like you said, like the slowing down and just like less frenetic energy in your system? And like possibly the smoking was like calming. It was like a solution for symptoms that like you no longer had when you put yourself in a slower environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Um I think yeah, the way addiction works sometimes is like you feed it with something else. And so maybe my um, addiction for smoking turned into more of a passion for um, learning about food and other things that were slightly healthier. So I felt like it was probably a good trade there.
Right? Like life's all about like making those trades and like one
Yeah.
little increment better. It reminds me of long story short, I moved to Dallas and gained a bunch of weight and it wasn't a mystery why. Like I was eating really, really badly. And one of the substitutions I made was I gave up my jelly bean habit and replaced it with grapes and cherries. You can have as many grapes as you want. You just can't buy the 5 bags of jelly beans at the grocery store every week anymore. Like, no. So yeah, just like one little bit more. But it was to your point, like at the same time that I did that, I was also finding exercise and just feeling better in general. And so I feel like I was soothing myself with the jelly beans. And once I didn't need to be soothed anymore, giving up the jelly beans like wasn't. wasn't nearly as hard. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes, yeah.
little story.
Jelly beans are good though, every once in a while.
Oh
Gotta get
God,
some jelly
a
beans.
little too
Yeah.
good, if you ask me.
Is
Especially those black ones, man. Like they're just, I could have a whole bag of those
that the
guys.
licorice?
Oh yeah, black licorice, black jelly beans.
Well, you could get
Summer.
like really, really fancy, expensive licorice, so then you won't want to eat a lot.
So I'll just like savor it and like
Yeah.
dose it out to
Because
myself,
there's some pretty high-end licorice out there
like
I've found because I
artisan
like
licorice.
yeah, so
Mhm.
it's like,
Okay.
you know, pricey licorice, so you're not gonna wanna, just
You would
totally.
think that I'd be reasonable like that, and I guarantee you it'd probably still be a bad deal. That's why I had to stop buying candy because like I'll just eat it all. But anyways, so back to your point of like being more in nature and feeling like, I mean, you listed off several benefits that I'm sure it was kind of like an overall effect of feeling better in your life and feeling better in your mind, in your body, in your connections with people. I mean, you listed off having the answers to the questions that you wanted to know. I feel like that would probably be soothing for your mind. Connecting with people in a slower, more meaningful way. That feels good to the heart.
Yeah.
Like, it just sounds like it was a really positive change for you to leave the urban setting and be in and you said that was in rural Pennsylvania.
Uh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, I was getting more into food and then it was in Pennsylvania and then I worked a few years in Vermont and organic sustainable farms and
Like doing the same thing that you were doing in Pennsylvania, or was that doing something a little bit different
uh yeah, organic farms, sustainable farming.
at both places?
Yeah.
And why did you make the change from the one to the other?
Oh, well, Pennsylvania was just like a week or two and then
Oh,
that was just like visiting my friend and then I actually like got like a season in or with going to a sustainable farm in Vermont. And then from
gotcha.
there I was kind of like I got to make a change in my life because I was, living in kind of the city-esque area and teaching music. So I was thinking, well, I kind of want to get out of the city area. And I also got another job. I was always worked in restaurants also throughout my life. And I was kind of getting more and more skills in the last few years also. So that was like a parallel potential career choice of being a chef and kind of working my way up a few decent restaurants and up to the point of lead chef and getting trained in. So that was like kind of like two things going on. Decision needed to be made of should I stay and should I stay or should I go? Stay and be a
Totally.
chef and I love food and then kind of go and learn go deeper into the rural America and learn more about clean energy and food systems and some other sustainable um natural resource questions that I had. So I think in the end, my heart was in learning more and getting out there and exploring. So that's what I did.
Mm. And was it hard still, even though your heart is taking you this way, was it still hard to leave behind the life you had to leave behind?
I prepared pretty well, I think,
How
for it
so?
the last few months or so. So I was like dwindling down my possessions and yeah, I was excited. So it was, something that wasn't as hard. So
It
I
sounds
kind of
like you
prepared
had,
for it.
yeah, you had a few months to kind of get up to speed with the change and let it unfold at a nice pace. It
Yep.
wasn't like this all happened
Yeah.
in like a week.
Right. Yeah. I had the privilege of time on my hands of just mulling it over for months. So
As
it
we
wasn't,
do, as we all do,
yeah.
sometimes you need those months. Um, that's so awesome. What do you remember is like the best thing, like when you got to Vermont, your new life? Like that's such a different change of pace and all of that. Like, what do you remember being like, I'm so grateful I did this because
Um, I just like working hard physically, and I enjoyed like working the long days. I mean, that's like something you don't really get out in nature in a urban environment so much. Like you might find a job like working construction or something, but you're still in the city. So
Mhm.
being out, completely out in like blue sky with the soil and the few people to talk with all day and, weed some garlic and look at the birds and hear, um, the wind and hear the quiet. I think all that was attractive.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are people who are just tuned to nature and it's like it lights up in a magical way, like you're saying, like all this different sounds and whatever. And then you could stand somebody in the middle of that same spot and they're like, okay, I see it. Are we done now? Can we go back to all the stimulation, all the noises, all the things? Yeah. I mean,
Right.
and it really is just a matter of like finding the environment that brings out the best you that you can find, if it feels better.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that you were at the Pennsylvania one for only like a week. So that must have been a really profound week. Like the fact that that
Yeah.
was kind of the turning point of like, wow, like I want this. I want my life
Yeah.
to be this. And then maybe, yeah, it was a few months. Is that right? Like you had that experience and then those were the few months that you molded over and then you took your left turn.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, the few weeks in Pennsylvania was really inspiring. And then working in Vermont was again like kind of doubling down on being even more inspiring. I got more questions. I was on the farm thinking, um, they were a sustainable farm. So I was thinking if they're sustainable, do they save seeds? So that was another question I had in my mind about seeds in general and saving them and why people do it or don't do it, and what that means for sustainability. So that led me to wanting to learn more and then eventually going to Minnesota and other places, going back to school for plant breeding later on and um, continuing the journey of seed saving, seed breeding, got a master's in seed breeding and started my own organic vegetable seed company, North Circle Seeds, eventually. So some of those questions really got in deep around that time in Vermont.
Yeah. And you said you did it in seasons, meaning like you were only there for a little while and then you went back, or like how did that part, what does that mean that you did it in seasons?
The farming season, and then I would teach music in the
So like you would
fall
go back to the city?
just for 1 year, and then I went to Minnesota.
Gotcha. So was it only one season in Vermont?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Wow. Yeah. I mean, talk about a life-changing year of your life. How old were you that year? Do you remember?
I was like 25.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense as far as like, is this it or is this not it? Like that was about the same time that I had
Yeah, I think
my,
that's what a lot of people are thinking, you know,
yeah. What do you think a lot
what
of people are
direction
thinking?
is my life gonna go in? And then I was meeting a lot of people around that time that were like 30, and they're like, once you hit 30, you don't have these questions anymore. You're like, my life is my life. And it's hard to imagine when you're like mid 20s or so, like that it's gonna get easier to figure out like direction in life. But I think once I hit, early 30s, I was pretty satisfied with everything.
Well, you made some choices that
Yeah.
not everybody would have made the same choices to leave behind the old life and build a new one out of nothing, Not everybody takes that leap. And yeah, I feel like when we hit our 30s, either you're satisfied by the risks you took and they're paying off, or hopefully not regretting the risks you didn't take and how like wow this
Yeah.
path just did not get better with time. you know like
Mhm.
that was, do I stay at the software company or do I make the leap into I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to start my own business, and like
Yeah.
I mold that thing for like 4 years and eventually it was just like the risk, I feel like it's riskier to stay where I am because the path is not getting better. And what's it going to be at 30, at 35 if I stay here because it pays well? Like if that's the only reason that I have, I my heart wanted something different. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
you jump and you don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Got to jump at least once in life, right? Got to risk
Or
that.
all the
Yeah.
time, I heard a quote this morning that I really love that's like 20 seconds of courage every day will change your life. And
Mm.
I'm like, wow, that's a really interesting idea. And so today's day one, and already I've used my 20 seconds of courage like four different times. And already it's like, wow, like I have openings happening in my world that like weren't even there yesterday.
Mm.
So a little bit of courage goes a long way. But yeah, to your point, like hopefully everybody does it at least one time to prove
Yeah.
like you can change your life. You can make it what you want it to be. You can say yes to your heart. That's allowed. Scary, but allowed. So
Yeah.
you go to Vermont and you're doing the season and you're going to go back to the city and teach music. And so like how did that lead to Minnesota? Sounds like that's where you went next after that
Yeah.
year of back and forth. How did that turn happen?
Um, so I was looking to do a more um a bigger change and to work for a farm or learn from like the farmers and the stewards of the land before um like colonialists came. So the agricultural system in America or Turtle Island has been like thousands and thousands of years with Native American land stewards. So I was getting deep into it. Yeah, I was like kind of thinking, well, if I'm gonna do it, if I'm gonna learn, I should learn right and learn from people that have been doing it for, the longest and have the most history doing it. So I was trying to find Native American like nonprofits and groups around the East Coast, but there didn't seem to be too many overall, or at least none that I could find around that time in Vermont, because that's kind of where I was leaning to go. They had some Abenaki groups, um, but in terms of like workload and also like capacity to be someone to volunteer, the place that I found with Winona Duke, the land recovery project, seemed like it was happening and there was some need for the community. And I got to talk with Winona a few times about maybe coming out and kind of her describing, vast amounts of need with whether it be poverty or low income and just places that I knew I would be able to just um, provide um, some help. And on top of that, my own personal like journey of just wanting to learn more about agriculture seemed to fit into because there were like food sovereignty projects that were happening. So yeah, just wanting to learn about what the projects were and then help out as a kind of like a volunteer. So through AmeriCorps, I was able to volunteer for 2 years from 2012 to 2024. I mean, 2012
And
to
14.
2014.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And what is AmeriCorps? I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, AmeriCorps Vista program started with JFK around that time to help with civil rights. And I think it's one of the best ongoing programs still to this day. Kind of like the Peace Corps for America to combat low income and I would suppose rural communities. And the way it's structured is pretty well thought out too, because it's the community that hires or puts out the ask for vistas, and then the community writes the job description, and then the community hires the people that they would want. So the people that they would get in could be from anywhere. It could be within the community if they have people that are interested. It also could be people from outside the community that maybe have some different capacities to bring in. So I think what Land Recovery Project did, and I think what a lot of nonprofits or community groups do when they put out the notice for award for AmeriCorps Vistas is, they kind of do a mix of both, right? Like get some people from within the community that know the community really well. Also, it's led by the community, but then also get in potentially some people with other skills from outside. Like I didn't know that I had development skills, but I kind of was thrown into, grant writing and keeping up with some of that, which led me down that direction actually in my career later on is because of being just thrown into that role of, being a decent writer and writing for funding. I didn't know that I would develop, that kind of skill later on. Um, but yeah, just filling those roles too is something of importance to groups trying to make positive change and impact.
Yeah, that's huge. Having the knowledge of how to write the grant, how to find the grant, all the things. I mean, grants come up over
Yep.
and over again in these conversations. And it's like if there's one skill that I can see like threaded through so many different things, it's like grant writing, getting the
Yeah.
funding to like, yeah, what is it that you want to do? That's so cool. I didn't even know that the AmeriCorps existed. So I learned something new today. So thank you for that. And did you like Dan, he talked about being in the Peace Corps and how like he kind of presented like here's the skills I have. And they talked about like this position, he eventually got in a different position. What was that like? Did they ask you like what kind of work do you want to do? And you told them, and then they ultimately picked your project or place based on like what they had available, or like how, like exactly where did you land when you started working for them?
I might have came at it backwards because I just wanted to work for Land Recovery Project and like hang out with the community here and volunteer and help out and kind of like do like woofing in a way, just kind of which is the worldwide organic opportunities on organic farms. It's kind of like a hippie idea of like just, getting housed somewhere for free and then kind of working for free, but just paying your own as you go. So that's kind of was my thought was like I would just kind of volunteer and move to like other places and keep, on this train of learning. But the volunteer Vista program was like offered to me when I was there. So then that was a summer program, and then pretty soon after I was invited to do like another year and then another year. So um, yeah, it was a good way to get paid a little bit. I mean, it's volunteer amount of money, so it's like $400 every 2 weeks about. So it's like barely enough to live on. And you're encouraged to get EBT and um, yeah.
Well,
So, and then yeah, we got some housing too, which helped. So yeah, it's very yeah, it's I think the one uh thing about America Vista is it's hard for maybe someone that is already like low income to do Vista because it's almost geared towards like post-college grads that might have some extra privilege and money to burn. Because I think I burned a couple $1,000 just to be able to live
mm-hmm,
with that, very meager AmeriCorps salary.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you already have a house and stuff, you could, yeah, I suppose you could probably make it work with the EBT and everything.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Um, okay, so you said that was 2 years?
Yeah, so then at the end of the 2 years, I was learning seed saving. I went to this native seed search seed school, which is and also another nonprofit in Arizona. They do all sorts of seed work, and I kind of got inspired there to start my own seed company even more because of the really inspiring Bill McDorman, who was leading the classes at that time, and just how important it is to do the work of seed stewarding and how much of that's been lost throughout the last 100 years. So I brought some of that knowledge back from that school in terms of record keeping and keeping seeds, and also helping play a role in um, funding with the Indigenous Seed Keepers Network. And so that was led by Indigenous seed keeper leaders in the region and in the country, and helped yeah, get some funding. So I had a role with that project for the next 3 years. And then after that, started working more with the White Earth Tribe and food sovereignty, and continuing working with food systems. One of the big things we got was a grant for a mobile market, um, which was essentially a food truck that would deliver groceries throughout the tribe. A creative solution to, not having a grocery store yet, but a grocery store on wheels. And throughout that, from 2017 to 2022, 5 years, helping with garden tilling programs and growing vegetables throughout the White Earth area, but also starting my own farm and starting my own seed company during that time as well.
You mentioned that starting your seed company, you became even more inspired when you went to Arizona and heard the person. I didn't catch the name, but
Yeah, Bill McDorman. Yeah,
okay,
if
yes.
you're out there.
So I'm wondering, like, it sounds like you were already thinking about starting your own seed company if you got inspired even more. Is that, did I read that right?
Yeah, because in Vermont, I was kind of questioning a lot about why didn't sustainable farms save their own seed, and then I kind of like got a lot of those questions answered at that seed school, and
Yeah.
that inspired me. Yeah,
Well, and so my other
I could go
question,
into that, but that's maybe another conversation because I
I
could talk for
want
hours about
I want to
seeds. So
know because like that's why I love these episodes. Like people say things and I'm like I've literally never had this cross my mind. Found sound, saving seeds. Like these are things that I don't even know exist. AmeriCorps. So yeah, eye-opening conversation. And I also really want to know what was so inspirational about Bill McDermott. Like what broke through of what he was doing.
he was literally jumping around the room. Like he's just a very like charismatic, like
Really excited.
really excited and infectious in a way. It was just
Yeah.
like how abundant seeds are. Like you grow one seed out and you get 8,000, and looking at corn pollen, like there's a billion in there in one tassel. Like there's not a billion of like many things in nature, and just this very extraordinary scientific facts, but also just, yeah, almost a magical sense of like
Yeah.
what seeds provide in terms of abundance and the capacity of hope in a way. And like it's, there's a lot of like seed metaphors that come out, like planting a seed as an idea, or um, and yeah, maybe that's just something I'm attracted to as well. And I'm always like a very um, optimistic person. And the way I look at like things like climate change, like I'm very optimistic about it in terms of um, growing year to year. Um, every year, climate change and global warming is going to look differently. It's happening, but my personal opinion is like it's difficult to predict. I think of about 5 years ago, people were really, really talking about wetter springs as a trend, and in my mind, I'm like, I don't know, maybe. And then right now, just the last year or two, people are talking about hot, dry springs, and then now we're looking at no snow in February, which is very odd. So I think a lot of that. Um, um, Adaptability in life with seeds, with work, that quality has really stuck out to me as an important life quality. And so you're adapting seeds year to year. That's what the seeds know. If you're listening to the seed and saving them, what you're selecting for is something that's thriving in the environment in that 1 year. Obviously, life goes on past 1 year cycles, but um, there's something there's something to be said about recharging every year, every week. There are these rhythms, and um, to be listening to and to be open to um, listening to the people around us and the environment around us and the seeds around us is something that I think I started to um, really develop as an adult and wanting to incorporate into my seed business. So it's North Circle Seeds, and I see it as a circle of growers, a circle of life, and we're in the north. And yeah, there's this um I was raised Jewish, and there's this Jewish tradition, or not tradition, but kind of thought of like there's a crack in everything. I think Leonard Cohen has a song where he says that in a lyric, and I kind of take that to heart, where to mean for me that I don't know everything, and the crack is the openness, and the openness is to learn from others, and um, yeah, and if we're trying to predict, which we do, that's the markets, right? We try to predict customers and behavior, and it's good to do to be able to understand groups, but to also to be open to the changes and to try to be aware and then to adapt to those changes. So that's my little rant about
Oh,
seeds and how it kind of got me roped in to those kinds of ways of thinking.
yeah. I love what you said about like the picture he painted of just how much possibility there is with a seed. Like I heard another quote
Yeah.
that really this reminds me of this like a single acorn holds the promise of 1,000 forests. That like if you
Hmm.
have the start, I mean, it's kind of limitless. Like that's the whole point of nature and the
Yeah.
continuation of it. So
And the abundance is like completely overwhelming. So I think that's the other like thing that I've learned about with seed work is like you're looking at worlds within worlds within worlds, which is what the universe is, right? We have, multiple universes out there. So it's too much to even comprehend, right? So doing seed work, you're constantly selecting for like one plant or like 10 or like, these very, very small numbers. And in your head, you're thinking, how many things did I not select? And it's insane. It's infinities, right? You're keeping out basically infinity type numbers, and you're selecting for these very, very small numbers. And it's an overwhelming thought that how much we're able to do that. And we have to do it to survive and live all the time. But if we're really mindful of like how each time we say no to an idea, which we do, um, it defines us as within our work as well. So I think that's like kind of trained my mind to be able to carry that on to other kinds of work, like with my business or with the university, and be able to make decisions and to feel comfortable with yeah saying saying no to like some things that seem really, really appealing, but you have to be, as we grow up, have to um define ourselves with the work that we are able to dive the deepest into. And by doing that, we have to give up a lot of other things on the outside.
that's really beautiful concept. And in general just sounds like the opposite of FOMO, which I feel like most people
Yeah.
fall on that side of the camp of like they gotta have it all. And what you're talking about is like the superpower, the brilliance even of like being willing to say no 99
Yeah.
billion times because the one is the one you want. You don't need 99, but you need the one that is the right one, like
Right.
most people don't think like that. Not that I do
Yeah, because it's
anyway.
all about selection. Yeah. It's like selecting the plants that are growing well in a population. Like you might have thousands of plants, but you're selecting a few. So thinking
Yeah.
about all the grains of pollen, all the kernels, all the things you didn't select. I mean, you could eat them. You could put them back into nature. You could do something with them. You could put them into making fuel or something else useful, or, just putting it back into the soil where the squirrels are going to enjoy it. Um, and everything has a place. But yeah, I think that's also like I'm not the best at that also. So that's also why that's my kind of mantra is because I'm always doing a lot of different things. So it's always a good reminder to keep at it, to keep um selecting the things that,
Yeah.
we're doing the most focused and meaningful work because yeah, like we only have so much time. So to do one thing really, really, really well I think is a great thing when people can figure out what the one or two things are in their life that they could do that with.
Yeah. Do you think 7-year-old you would have believed that that one thing was seeds? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, 7-year-old. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, I remember like saving marigold seeds with my dad when I was about like 8 or 10 and thinking that it was pretty cool. We would just like take the seeds and put it into a paper bag and I mean, maybe that was where I got some curiosity from
Yeah.
too. But yeah, I don't think it would have been that far out of the realm. I don't think I really had a solid idea of like what I wanted to be.
Yeah. Oh, well, and I know you said that's your little rant about seeds, but I feel like I still have a bunch of questions and I have to give you props because I gotta say, like, seeds, probably not one of the topics where I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably fascinating. Like I feel like probably like me, a lot of people overlook it as like they're
Hmm.
so small. It's just seeds. Like, how interesting could that be? But like, dude, I feel like you've opened up worlds within worlds within worlds over here. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. And thank you, Bill McDermott, whoever you are, for inspiring such enthusiasm about this abundance. Like I love feeling for abundance in lots of ways. And yeah, I never thought a conversation about seeds would that's where you're gonna end up. What
Yeah,
what
yeah.
are the freaking chances? That's awesome. Um, would you please come back and we could continue the conversation? Because there's definitely more that I would like to hear about seeds in general. And then, like you said, about doing one thing really, really well. And yet you are multifaceted, multi-talented. You've taken it in multiple different directions that I'd like to explore that process of like, even though it's all seeds, still like you're doing business with seeds. You had a podcast at one point with seeds. Like you're still taking it in multiple different directions, like all still kind of on that same central theme. So yeah,
Yeah.
come
And I
back.
think the central theme, like just to keep my what I want to be doing and um trying to keep that focus
Yeah.
as much as possible is changing my mindset a little bit more geared towards food systems. And I'm really enjoying that work. Um, I started with the University of Minnesota RSDP, Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. And we could talk more about that next time and all the great work we're doing with grocery stores, rural grocery stores, and yeah, I guess to connect one piece is like we sell our seeds in a lot of food co-ops. And
Nice.
EBT actually takes the money for seeds. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting connections with what's happening in Minnesota. A lot of great movement with grant opportunities that Minnesota's learned about and supported and increased support for with infrastructure of food aggregation systems, which is a fancy word for food hubs or farmers coming together to store their crops, and also food co-ops, which I'm on the board for our local food co-op and where I'm at. And um, yeah, collaborative food systems work seems to be the focal, if anything. I mean, there's a lot to that, but
Yeah.
that's what keeps it fun, I think, too, is to be involved in something that is a little bit of a bigger scope that involves lots of different people and expertise that gets into marketing and business, but it also gets into the real growing and soil health and these things that are creating a real positive impact. And to be able to connect all those things together in positive ways, not only for the producers and the land, but to provide educational resources for customers and people to learn and connect. There's infinite ways to do it, and it's great to be in a role that supports that effort.
Yeah.
And would love to talk more about all of that next time.
Yes. Yes, please. Okay, cool. Well, we will be back on the next episode to dive even deeper into this world within a world and see what else fascination we can bring to light for me and for anybody else who has listened. So, thank you so much, Zachary, for being with us on this episode. Very much looking forward to the next one. All of you who have listened, thank you so much for spending your time with us. It means a lot to me that these stories are getting brought to the light of day. These people who they show up in all kinds of ways and they do all kinds of fascinating things that you never even heard of. And it's all happening right now. Like there's so many possibilities for how we can each show up and make a positive impact. You can literally do whatever interests you. There's a pathway into it that's perfect for you, no matter who you are, where you're coming from. And I love that these episodes get to widen out the view of possibility of what people might be considering for themselves. So, again, Zachary, thank you for being here and sharing your story. We'll be back next time. Everybody, have a great rest of your day, great week, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, bye. Welcome back, everyone. We are once again here with Zachary Page, and picking back up in his story after last week's episode, we heard about an urban kid who migrated to the middle of nowhere in a couple different middle of nowheres, and loving that and talking more about that in last episode about why nature called to him and all the beauty and worlds within worlds that he found there. That phrase has really stuck out to me from that episode. Um, and this time we are picking back up with kind of the AmeriCorps, like the Peace Corps, but within America. That assignment was 2 years, and that was an opportunity to get paid to work on a project that he already wanted to work on. And after that came to a close, what happened next? Let's just pick it up right there.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Carly. After AmeriCorps, I got a job with the White Earth Tribe for food sovereignty coordinator. It's a native preference position, but no one else applied that year. So being the
Meant to
only
be.
applicant, yeah. And
Yeah.
I've been working with White Earth and food systems for um, 5 years at that point. So I had a pretty good idea and handle on what the community needs were, and working with the community in White Earth, gaining trust. So um, basically, just in that leadership position, that's what you do. You just sit back and listen, and allow the community needs and ideas to basically show themselves by just going to lots of meetings and listening, and then just kind of helping manage projects like the garden tilling program that we brought back. We're starting to till 30 and then 60 and then 90 and then over 100 gardens every year for the 3 years I was there. So it was a
Like you
program that
would
used to be
like you would take a
involved.
tiller and like people could raise their hand and
Yeah.
say, I need my garden tilled.
Yeah, so we got funding for a little tiller, a trailer, and we got it hitched on the truck. And yeah, it's kind of fun to do that in the spring, just drive around, meet people, till their garden up, and give them some seeds and some advice on any planting tips, and then yeah, move on to the next one. And that was a really um, successful project, and the people in White Earth like naturally want to garden at home. Everybody's pretty rural, and community gardens are a good idea sometimes, and in some places, but we've kind of learned that, there's a big elder population. There's a lot of people attracted to raised beds and growing food in them. And for where we were, the garden tilling program was where it was at. And that's where many people were interested in growing their own food.
And I'm just curious, when you say that it was a successful project, like what is your definition of success?
Well, we checked in with the gardeners at the end of the seasons and just to see like what they're growing, and it was that's pretty good. Yeah,
Like
people were
they were
growing.
able to harvest a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, successful would, by my definition, is getting the seeds in the ground, maintaining them, the plants, and getting enough support if they needed it to help with the whole process, and getting some good food at the end of it.
Mm, okay. Well, yeah, I definitely dig that. Um, so you had that project as part of it. Were there other projects that stand out that you got to do during that time?
Yeah, I helped get some funding for a mobile market grocery, and so this was basically a food truck from the sous chefs Sean Sherman in Minneapolis. He has his new restaurant, Owamni, now. James Beard winner. And that was great to have their support. I knew Sean from the Indigenous Farming Conference. I used to um, help organize with Winona LaDuke. But yeah, so we got this food truck. We're going to powwows. We're cooking traditional foods like bison, walleye, and um, then we came across another opportunity to work with Blue Cross Blue Shield in Minnesota and started creating these meal kits. So a meal kit is basically everything you'd need to cook a meal prepackaged, no more, no less. And we'd have Native American chefs and young chefs create the recipe. We'd film the cooking and then kind of get all that out to the community, and see who's interested in getting a kit that um, would have healthy foods, like maybe it'd be like bison burgers or fried walleye with squash and wild rice. So foods that people are interested in, traditional foods, and foods that were produced locally. And yeah, it was a popular program. And then that was in 2019. And then just a few years ago, we started the program again in a bigger way. So now it's going on again, but we have way more funding and kits, and we're doing it every month. And um, that's with combined with the Mana Food Co-op grocery store, who's helping out package some of the kits. And then jumping ahead a little bit here, but White Earth is also interested in um, having their own grocery store to increase food access there. And we had we got more. I was able to help get some funding for that as well. The
Awesome.
process, the beginning process steps of developing a co-op.
Yes. Did you have like a whole team of people? You said you were in the leadership position. Were there other people working with you to do all of this?
Yeah, the team was small because the agriculture department didn't exist for a few years before we were hired, me and my immediate boss. And so it was just kind of like a two-person team. But we would work with the tribal college extension group. We would work with tribal health, public health, diabetes center, the elders. So there were a number, and then the community centers. That's each community. There's about 8 or 10 distinct communities within White Earth. White Earth is so rural that each community sometimes are separated by 20, 30 miles. Most of them are within about 10, 15 miles, but there are a few that are kind of far out there. So getting to each community is really important. Having community meetings by the community councils is important. And having there are representatives for each community that we would serve. So sometimes we'd want to get support for a project or an idea, and we'd just go out and do the rounds and let people know what we're up to and get any further ideas from there. So yeah, that was always a pretty big part of the work is to work together.
Yeah, it sounds very collaborative. Where like they're
Hmm.
probably generating the original idea to some extent, like you said, listening to what they have going on and looking for patterns and trends, and then letting them weigh in again as far as like, hey, we're doing it. You said, and we're doing it, and what else, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, community collaboration at its
Yeah,
finest.
and with the co-op, we had over 300 surveys from 300 families. So not just people like people representing their family. So we had a lot of input on the the first process of um, what a White Earth cooperative grocery store might look like. And it's going to be a really slow process because, if we're going to have 7,000 members, which is how many people are in the tribe that live up by White Earth, or even more to expand it to anybody that's a White Earth member who lives in Minneapolis. There'll be a lot of people that might want to vote for being on the board and also just the beginning steps. So having either consensus based or at least majority based um, um, opinions or just processes to move things forward. Yeah, it takes time. So, but it's good.
That's like, I feel like, especially just in the world right now, there's so much polarity and division and,
Yeah.
co-op. Like the whole point is that we're going to work together and we need to agree to some extent. We need to find what works best for the majority. Yeah, cooperation is such an interesting idea and can be very challenging to put into practice. Maybe I shouldn't assume.
Yeah.
Maybe it just needs patience. I don't know. What do you think makes for successful cooperation after your experience in
Like
it?
a food co-op or cooperation.
Kind of anything. I mean, it sounds like you have
Actually, yeah,
experience in lots of
yeah, it
ways.
sounds like it'd be like this crazy like thing, like how are you gonna get everybody to agree on one thing? But I think one thing that people do generally agree on is eating good food. So like I think like
Mm.
it goes across the political spectrum. Like you'll get people that are super strong, Republican right and super, lefty, yoga going people, and like that circle kind of around and meets with good food. We've seen that at time in and time in at our food co-op. I mean, maybe we'd have some people that are like coming in like, I'm not gonna wear a mask in the store or something like that. That's kind of political, um, but generally, I mean, people that support an idea like local foods come from every angle of life, and it's a really great way to get people to come together. Because it's one thing that I think, yeah, everybody wants to see happen in their local community when we have community events like we have this Deep Roots Festival with the Sustainable Farming Association. It's just like the most positive theme that you could possibly, I think. I mean, I'm just very passionate about it, but you just see everybody agreeing, right? Like this is so great and bringing their kids and going to farms and learning about bees and honey and local seeds and local vegetables and sheep and lambs and it's kind of 4-H-y sounding, but it's also with attached to like a food cooperative, we have food co-ops have not just the mission of sustainable agriculture and organic and supporting local, but also education and wellness. So there are these cooperative principles that each co-op tries to do to support the community too. And then it's cooperatively owned by members. So it's not just one person owning it. It's not run by a nonprofit with a board. It's run literally and owned literally by like our food co-op, Mana Food Co-op's owned by 1,000 people now. So 1,000 people own a share, and we all get a vote, and we vote for the board to basically be the tie with the community, try to get funding, make it happen.
Mhm.
But then the board hires a manager, and then that's the link to the store. So then the
Mhm.
manager runs the store and the staff and does all the ordering. So the manager essentially does everything within the store, the confines of the store,
Yeah.
and even the finances. Um, but then they come to the board and say like, "Hey, the store is not doing too great, in this way or this way, and can you help with this?" Or,
Mhm.
the board's volunteer based, so um, there's a reason why each board member is there, right? Like someone like me, like I've got connections with the White Earth community and some projects there and with the seeds. And then other board members have graphic design degree, or maybe they're another vendor at the co-op. Or maybe they've been on boards of co-ops before and they kind of have some insight. So I just love the co-op structure. I think it's a really great um, structure to look at when you're looking at any business. But yeah, in Minnesota, we've got more food co-ops than any other state in the country.
Yeah.
There's well over 30. I don't know the count right now, but my seed company, we sell all our seeds pretty much primarily in food co-ops because we kind of know like they're going to support local, and
Yeah.
also they know that I'm able to do seed saving education and kind of tie in that education piece.
Mm.
So that's it's a nice world to live in where
Yeah.
things are kind of more holistic, right? They're more you're not just thinking one train, um, how profitable can we make this? It's more you're thinking about more things and more values than just the dollar. But of course, you want the profit in the store. But I think that added X factor is that if you have 1,000 members, then when you're in need and if you're providing that service for the community and you're supporting the community, when the co-op's in need, the community might support the store. So
Mhm.
it's that relationship, right? It's a relationship with the community that the store serves. And our Mana Food Co-op, we have 47 vendors within 100 miles. And
That's a
that's
lot.
yeah, and that's our pride and and what we do. And we're always trying to do more and work with low income population. We're working with the food shelf right now with the meal kits, and churches and schools, farm to school. So it's kind of endless. Um, but I think at every so often you want to almost like institutionalize something, or like make it not institutionalize, that's not the right word, but like make something like a program that feels like it's really stable, even if it's not. Um, like the meal kits program, like it's completely based off grants, but even if it only does last for 2 years, nothing lasts forever, right? So I gotta appreciate it when it's there. But I think it's nice to make it feel like it is gonna last forever, and also um, to really revel in the projects and the connections that we're making as we're making them because yeah, everything's temporary, everything's fluid and moving. So um and I think that's also another key to all grocery stores is being adaptable. Like being adaptable to your community, being adaptable with your staff. Like our staff is so small at the I should also mention I'm on the board for the Mana Food Co-op. I'm the board president. But our staff is so small and so dedicated, and we wouldn't exist without like the sacrifices that the staff makes in terms of however much an hour, how if it's starting at 13 or 16 an hour. Right now Walmart's providing I should say names, the big guys out there are providing just as much, if not more, for similar positions. So like a local community owned store, the overhead, as we all know, or the not the overhead, but the profit margin, as we all know, is razor thin with grocery stores. So every little bit counts, and we know that. So keeping our labor down to as much as we can, and we kind of have, an idea of where that can be. So, obviously we provide raises and, fair pay, but it's just those little things like the staff and the board getting together to volunteer, a few hours a week to put some meal kits together. Because then we're saving money that way. If we're volunteering some time and doing these little things, it all adds up. And I think we all see that bigger picture. And, um, you know, I could go on about food co-ops, but I think
You
it's
really
that
can. It's awesome.
that volunteer effort, that worker effort. And we've tried the worker owner model a little bit. There is some issues with liability there that stores have run into over time. But I don't know if people have heard of co-ops where basically it's worker owned. So then nobody can shop there except for the workers. That's one model. But then another model is, the owners can opt in to volunteer or work at the store, and then they get a huge discount at the store. So there's ways to do it, and we've explored a few ways. And we'll probably continue to explore that, but
Yeah. Dude, you
I'll
said
stop
so many
talking.
good things. So many good things that I could take and run with. But that question that started that was what makes cooperation successful? And what I heard you talking about was like this shared sense of value, shared sense of mission, like seeing the bigger picture of what truly are we here for. It's not about maximizing profit, which in independent grocery, like it better not be because yeah, you're you're talking razor thin margins there. But like getting a group of people together who can transcend the little personal differences that we all carry. I mean, everybody's into whatever they're into, and that's totally fine. That's not a problem, especially when you have a bigger picture that everybody's like, I want local food, I want good food. And that also, like, really, it almost seems like when you sink down into the human condition of like, everybody's got to eat, every single person on the planet. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care, what gender you are, like any of it doesn't matter. Like we all need food. We all have to fuel ourselves. And so that is one of the reasons that I get so passionate about food and food systems is that it's so unifying to come together around those kinds of things where we can all agree that like, yeah, I want food. I like food. And maybe that is the key to cooperation is like finding that common ground where everybody can agree and then giving everybody their freedom to be as different as they want to be. But like, this is what we're here working on. This is the foundation of it. And it sounds
Yeah.
like, and I wonder, why do you think it is that Minnesota has more food co-ops than any other state? Like, what is
I don't know. I think Minnesota is special. Maybe just because I live
this
here. We got all the
special?
lakes
Okay.
and
Okay.
Minnesota votes more. A higher percentage of people vote in Minnesota of any
Like
state
in
in the
political elections, you mean?
Yep, we're
Okay.
constantly above 80%. And we're always the highest in every national election. So there's something there, right? Like Minnesotans
Yeah.
love to vote. There's something about that engagement. I think that actually is special in Minnesota.
That's fast. I had no idea.
I think Wisconsin also is some higher level,
I
but
wonder,
we're
yeah, I wonder what that is. Be very curious. Uh,
yeah.
and okay, so how, like, when did you very first get introduced to the idea of a food co-op? Do you remember, like, where that first crossed your path?
Um, I worked in a health store in um New York called Manna, the same name as the co-op that we have going on here
It's
in
kind
Detroit
of
Lakes.
wild.
And I think I thought it was a co-op for a while, and then I realized it wasn't. But it was just a pretty cool natural food store, and I just like the community aspect of it. People coming in talking about health and wellness. When you think about community meeting spaces, though, when you think about the epidemic of loneliness, and you think about um, just spaces and community towns that don't exist anymore, and you see stores not being able to make it, and how hard it is to be a store or a community space where people actually go to spend time with other people. So I kind of think now more than ever, places that do make sense to exist, like a place to get food, something that isn't, maybe that has more of a chance to be a physical location. Um, like if people are buying more electronics online, then we see less Radio Shacks, right? And if people start buying more food online and, to their door, we might start seeing less grocery stores, right? But I think it's one of those things where it's so primal, it's so core to like you're saying, like everybody needs to eat, that it's like one of these last holdouts where it's like we don't want to just have an online world, for everything. And sure, convenience is a factor, and we could still, do deliveries and stuff like that. But to have a place where people can go share experiences, meet other like-minded people, and like the other, yeah, what I was saying before, the beauty of having uh a movement around good food, local food, healthy food. It's very interrelated related with health and wellness. So everybody agrees they want to be healthy. Everybody wants to, live as long as they can, and to have that interrelated quality of food is medicine, and having the mindset of wanting to connect on that ground, I think is
Mhm.
really powerful. And I think that co-ops hold a unique space in that, where um, we might, like I was talking about adaptability. I just love everything about adaptability, and I think that is what makes like we were talking before about success. I think that's what makes uh, businesses successful. I think that's what makes people successful, is when they're adaptable and able to listen and work through time and solve problems together.
Mm.
And I think co-ops are uniquely built to be adaptable because there is that relationship with the community, which a big box store doesn't have. I mean, maybe they have it in some degree, because a lot of people shop there and they have cheap stuff that a lot of people can get, but they don't have a deeper back and forth relationship. And when you're working with producers, when you're working with people that actually produce, a solid food product, whatever it be, bison or beef or eggs, or, these staples, milk and vegetables, and you're shopping every week, you're getting the local foods from your people right in your town. That's another powerful kind of exchange, and it's kind of taking out the need for um money in a way. I mean, you're preaching values closer to home. So, um, capitalism is important in every level, and like local um driven motivation to thrive in an environment that needs to be competitive, but also um, you know, going down to its core, like um um, bartering, trading, and learning from other people is, gets down a little deeper too, where when you're able to do that, I think it feels special as well.
It's like the human to human contact that, like you said, about the
Hmm.
epidemic of loneliness. Like, I feel like money, it almost is that separator of like, let me just throw some money at it and like not actually connect with another human being. So, yeah, when you're
Yeah.
trading value for value, it's like you really see the person sitting in front of you and they see you. Like, you see their
Yeah.
value, they see your value. Like, it does, it goes deeper. I love that. Um,
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, money kind of is a little bit of a separator. It could be, and it is, like with the way things have trended with getting a lot of stuff, yeah, getting more things on through the internet after the pandemic and just how that has rolled out.
yeah. I mean, and I'm not a hater on capitalism or money in general. I love money. It's great. But like
Yeah.
there's a place where it has a function and it can create ease. And then, anything in this entire world isn't all good or all bad. I mean, money has its limitations where I do think it keeps people apart. It keeps people focused on some things that may or may not be what's really important, like we've talked about, like the food co-op system is not necessarily about maximizing profit. It really does sound like it's about maximizing impact. How
Yeah.
many,
And maybe it is profit, but then that profit could roll back into either the member. So the board would decide, if there's some really profitable co-ops out there in Minnesota, and they do really amazing things with their profit. Like they have grant programs
yeah,
for, the funds for organic farms. Some of them give back the dividends to their members. It's whatever the board decides, but even if, that could be a major goal of a co-op is, let's make the markup a little higher. Let's get a little bit more money our customers will pay. And we're in a more high-end area where we know we could, do that. And we think our members and our customers might pay a little bit more and, more power to those stores that can make more profit but yeah, but then to give it back out. So they're not just hoarding it, right? They're not just like going to the Bahamas with their single, one ownership model that's everybody owns it. So the board has to think about all the members and how this is going to benefit not just the members, but the members' thoughts and dreams and ideas too. So
yeah, like that
yeah,
stuff that's unifying us in the first place. So if the co-op is profitable, then kind of everybody wins,
right.
right? Like everybody's already there for they want the same things or close enough ish.
Yeah,
And that's the thing about money is like, dude, it doesn't money is not the root of evil by any means. Like it depends on whose hands are holding it. Like it's not the money,
right.
it's humans. And like, we can do good and bad things with just about anything. Money's just a tool. And in the hands of people who love the world and who love people, like those people need way more money because they do. They give it, they invest it, they make scholarships, they make food kits, they do stuff with it that like literally moves the needle in the quality of life for human beings. And that's a beautiful thing. So like I'm not going to sit here and say like money is bad and we shouldn't be profitable or anything like that, but it definitely is like just like anything else, any other kind of energy, it has to be intentional. What are you raising this money for and what do you pour it back into once you have it?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I was saying like before, like these projects like the meal kits that maybe they're only funded for 2 years and they're highly non-sustainable economically. Like you just like need a grant or some outside money to make it happen. But I guess my confidence around I don't know, like when people have a vision or like a or I don't know how to describe it, but you envision something and then it kind of like manifests that
Hmm.
kind of idea. I think we should think of these ideas and these good ideas that were funded once. That was such a great idea. To really try to get those permanently funded. Because I think like you're saying, like we need more money in the hands of um people doing organic. For instance, that's one. Just the demand in organic has gone up like insane amounts in the last 20 years. And it's to the point where it's just what the majority of what consumers want. And that's why you see like cheap organic, right? That's why you see Driscoll. I shouldn't name names, but the bigger berries, and they're getting them at Walmart Organic, big organic farms. So there's a difference between certified organic, a couple hundred acres of, selling one monocrop and getting them from your local slightly smaller operation. Um, there's a place for both of those. But there could be more funding going towards the middle guys doing them, and gals growing on 10 to 40 acres and supplying food to their regional food system rather than shipping it from other states, from California. And that would make a more resilient food system that would actually uh make energy costs cheaper. It would make a lot more sense for each region to care for itself to a degree and eat more seasonally, and connect to nature a little bit more. Like we're eating maple syrup at that time. I mean, maple syrup lasts forever, but um, um, eating what's in season is that's another trend, but there's also something to it. And also like connecting with the producers. A lot of times you'll have opportunities to like go to farms and pick apples when they're ripe, and there's something to that too. It's just connecting the consumer to the store, back to nature with the farmer. So it's like it's a nice cycle there, and to get the opportunity to see where the food comes from, right? Like there's kind of this Wizard of Oz quality to. I remember when I was a kid growing up, going to the supermarket with my dad, I would always think like, where does this come from? And I was thinking like it must come from, in my head, I was thinking it must come from like these like sci-fi factories, and like that are producing like where's this cream cheese coming from, and this, and it's not too far off, right? Like they're like there's these massive factories that produce um highly produ highly produced things like high fructose corn syrup and stuff that go into everything. But I think that's something that it's not readily um I guess transparent, where you're able to see like, there's this apple in the store. And then in a food co-op like ours, like you look up and there's a picture of the guy that's selling us the apples, because we like celebrate our vendors by throwing pictures up and talking about where the food comes from. So like it's kind of nice, I think, to have the transparency and the opportunity to be able to see not only the apple in the store, but the apple on the farm and the people behind the apple trees and how they treat them, and what it all goes into, to be more intentional and to learn more about our food in
Yeah.
general. It's like a little like university or a little education workshop when you're going into like a grocery store, or it could be a fun experience.
Well, I feel like it like raises the value of the food. When you just see the apples on the shelf and like they're just always there, that's how we start to take things for granted. But when you see like this is Dave and he lives 5 miles west of town, and he like it's his family's apple orchard, or like whatever the story is, I feel like that again, like you said, it goes deeper and it causes us to value that thing more, and to see that like it didn't just pop out of thin air and land on the grocery shelf. Like Dave is spending his days like doing this work, and that's why these are here. Like this is the end result of a human being who showed up and did the things. And yeah, I feel like we're maybe able to appreciate it more when we see like you said, like what actually goes into it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you end up as the board president? Did you say you've been that for 5 years?
I think 3 years as board president and maybe 5 years on the board. Um, yeah, I think we needed some more organization with our board. Well, like when I was um requesting to be president, just to be able to like set the agendas and have like a pretty good organized approach. And then we needed to get some files in order and stuff like that. So I kind of felt like just because it was a pet peeve, I needed to solve some of the those kinds of organizational issues going on, and that was pretty fairly easy to figure out. I had some support with Colluminate and
Mm-hmm.
a group that helps with co-ops, and we met with them a few times, and then since then we've met with CDS Co-op Development Service, and they've been great to get some advice with as well.
I love that you're like annoyed a little bit, and instead of like complaining about it, you're like, how about I just be in charge of this? I could do
Yeah.
this better, like take some responsibility. Like if you don't like something, make it different.
Yeah, our store report part of the agenda would just trail off to the end of the meeting, and it's like we didn't cover anything. So
Come on.
let's keep on track, in the future.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
Well, and it takes somebody seeing the vision about like, why is it important that we make it through this entire agenda? Like,
yeah.
and somebody needs to know about that and then use their energy to like focus in on it and keep everybody else focused in on it. Because I'm sure you weren't talking about nothing or like off
Yeah.
subject, but like, do we ever really reach a point or like an action step or, what
Right.
did we get out of this? Yeah, I'd be one of
Yeah.
those that like, I can't sit in meetings like that. Like, let me run it or I'm not coming back, you know?
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you only get that like a few times, right? Because we only have a few things we could really care about as deeply to like actually run, a meeting. Because you can't be board president and care about 10 different things, right? You could be on 10
Everything
different boards and kind of sit in the back and get the idea, but
to
there's a
drive
few things
something.
in life where you're like, I'm gonna, next time.
Yeah.
So
So why
that's
was why was the board co-op like why was that the thing that you're like I'm stepping up. I'm gonna my limited time I'm putting it here. Why that thing?
um I think, yeah, maybe the listener gets an idea at this point that I'm passionate about food co-ops, and I live this is the co-op in my town. This is the community I work with, and I think it's fun. I think it's something that's um I see the opportunity. So there's a lot of co-ops out there. There's a lot of really amazing um small farm, locally produced well supported regions in the country, like Vermont, for instance, is like many people there are very fine-tuned to like shop at a co-op or like just be um, uh, supportive generally of local food systems, and that culture has been fed very well. And like I spent some time in Vermont, and like 95% of people in the town shop at the co-op, and then you look across the street at the conventional grocery store and there's like two cars in there. So the co-op is able to lower prices like a lot because they have so many customers. So that's a very well established locally food supported community. And I think like Minnesota has a lot of potential, like rural Minnesota. We're not quite there. We're not quite like a Vermont, but I think we're getting there. I mean, we've got the most in the country, and there's a lot of, individual support for health and wellness through healthy foods. And I think as we see more outlets to be able to, am I going to spend my dollar at, Dollar General, or am I going to spend my dollar at, getting some local fruit from, this co-op that, hey, the prices aren't even that bad because we have some deals through Infra, which is a buying company. So we're able to have deals and pretty much be as low as Aldi in some of these lower priced stores. So once people are catching on, like, hey, the cost not, for an elite part of the community, I could shop there too. And we have EBT, and we've got memberships that were donated, so we could offer free memberships to some people in need too. And we'll work with people. It's only $150 for a lifetime membership. Now I feel like I'm doing a co-op commercial, but
Well, and like co-ops are something that I have not even dipped one single toe
yeah,
into. So I love getting to hear about something brand new for me, and I'm sure there's plenty of people listening who don't know anything about it either. So like
yeah.
$150 for a lifetime membership,
Yeah,
that's
and you
like
get
one
and for
so cheap,
ours,
but
yeah, and for ours you get 10% off produce forever every day. So that's I mean, we've got great organic produce too. I mean, you're not
yeah,
going to find that in Walmart or anywhere. So like we're the place to get the produce. We're the place also to get the local meat and eggs because we're like
yeah,
that's all of our suppliers is Ferndale turkeys from Minnesota, little, and smaller bison operations right by us. It's really, really good product. And that's what I am passionate about when I go there. It's like the meat and the produce. Like at this point I wouldn't even want to shop anywhere else because and then you meet the farmers and you get to know them and something to talk about, right? Like, oh, I had that bison burger last
delicious.
week and oh
Yeah.
man, that was a good burger. So it's fun to be able to talk with your fellow farmer friends about your products and what they're doing.
I also love how the donated memberships ties back to what we were talking about with money. It's like
Mm.
there's somebody who has a little extra money in their
Yep.
pocket, and here's what
Yeah.
they're doing with it. They're letting more
Yeah.
people like get into that who maybe $150, like, you know what? I don't have that. I would shop there. I'd be more than happy to shop there if I, didn't have to pay the membership fee. And so, yeah, like you use the extra money that you have to like break down barriers for other people to get access to those things. Like that's a beautiful way to use it.
Yeah, and that was one of our members. I'll call them out, Midwest Bank, from our town. They had a couple $1,000s donated to just that
Wow.
program, which to give
See, that's so cool.
free membership. So, that's the way we spent that money is to give out memberships for people who needed.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So it sounds like you're still the board president of the co-op in the town where you live, but you have switched jobs in that time.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah, and that's as passionate as I am about being on the board for Mana, that's a very volunteer after hours position and doesn't really actually take up too many hours of my life, but I think about it a lot.
Sure. Lives rent free in your head kind of thing,
Yep.
as passion often does. So yeah, how did your previous job come to a close, or did you find out about the new job and that's why you left the old job, or like how did that transition take place?
Um, it was mostly about not having to commute. So like I loved my job in White Earth for about 4 years. But it was getting to the point where it's an hour drive, so I was getting to the point where that was getting to be something, especially when I moved to be an hour away. So that's 2 hours driving every day. Yeah, the job that I applied for, the U of M, was also particularly a good fit for me. I think when the job application came out, 4 or 5 of my friends emailed it to me that day. Hey
That's
Zach,
like
this looks like a
meant to
job
be.
for you.
Yeah.
Um,
You gotta love that.
so
They like
yeah,
handcrafted
and
the
I love
position.
my job. Like I would love to have this job for the rest of my life. I mean, it's like it's a no-brainer. Like it's so there's such good support with the team that I work with, RSDP, the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships, Kathy Drager, Shannon. I could just go on and on um about this as well. Like so RSDP supports community ideas in Minnesota. This year, actually today, our idea briefs are due. And an idea brief is a very simple online application to see if it's a good fit to work with us. And we've got about $60,000 this year and about that most years into funds up to 5 or 6 projects. And we usually fund about 10,000 or so, 10 to 12,000 a project, but it's not
Mm.
doesn't really come in the form of money. It comes in the form of connections. So if somebody's got an idea, it should be in the realm of four focus points, which are sustainable ag and food systems, clean energy, um, natural resources, and community resilience. So one of those four or more than one. Um, and then we work in regions. So we've got the Northwest, the Northeast, Central, Southwest, Southeast. And there's an ED, executive director of each region. And then each region of the state also has a board made up of the community itself. And then there's boards within boards because like there's one for each of those focus areas. So like I work with the sustainable ag and food systems. I do work with the sustainable ag and food systems also in the statewide projects. Um, but with the region, just talking about all the things that are happening and yeah, so today is the day, February 14th, that um ideas are due in, and then what the community board will do is I'll help facilitate a meeting where we'll look at all the ideas that came in, and then we'll make decisions on funding. And yeah, so it'll like the other focuses of what we fund is ideas that all support the community and have a strong outreach element, and that's pretty clearly defined. And then we try also not to just straight up not fund ideas. Like if we think like an idea is a really good idea, but it's not developed yet, we'll actually like reach back to the people and like continue to develop that. And over time, maybe the next year they're going to write it again and they'll have their idea like better thought out and then we'll fund it in years in the future. So
So
we
you
don't
do
really,
that like once a year. You take these
yeah,
video briefs.
yeah, and we don't tend to forget. So if we're not funding you this year, we encourage people to apply again. And the other thing is that we try to connect the University of Minnesota resources. So it's just kind of this connection point. So if somebody has an idea for their nonprofit to, let's just say, do a research project with solar and farming. So there are farms out there that need energy. They're, not tied to the grid. It costs maybe tens of thousands of dollars to get them cost to the grid, but because we have this opportunity to work with clean energy, maybe we should get some solar panels out there and we should work together. And RSDP also has a clean energy resource team called CERTS. So we're able to work with people with clean energy projects. So yeah, something like that, like where we're utilizing University of Minnesota resources like grad students or um, faculty and or extension agents to help that idea. And sometimes it comes in the form of interns, like maybe a place needs an intern for, a few months. So a grad student might be a good fit for working with a project to spend their time. So that's
Mm.
another connection point that could
Yeah.
potentially happen.
I love that how like you just help plug them into the resources that are already at the U of M and
Right.
they just need to be connected. They just need to know who do I call? Who do I ask about this?
Yeah.
And you
And
guys
someone
have
might
that.
get,
You're already plugged in.
yeah. And someone might get paid in the meantime, like the grad student will get paid, but they'll be paid through the university, but they're working on your project. So that's pretty cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Best of both worlds for everybody. Win, win, win. Um, so how long have you been in that position? Not too long.
Just a year.
Okay. So as part of that position, this is how I met Zachary, was he was part of the pilot program that we did for RGI's, the Rural Grocery Initiatives, Rural Grocery Specialist Program. This is a certificate program, a micro-credential program that the pilot happened in the spring of 2023. And then here in January of 2024, we launched the first official cohort, and we're doing 3 cohorts for RGI this year in 2024. There's actually a link to that in the description box if you want to check out and learn more about this program, but it's to help the grocery stores that are needing to transition because their owners are wanting to retire. they're, ready to do something else. Often we see that when the current owner of a grocery store is ready to get out, the store will usually close instead of transition to a new owner. And that is bad news for the community. Obviously, they're losing access. A lot of the stores we're talking about are the only game in town. So if they close, now you're in a food desert. And now you got to drive 20, 30 miles if you can to go get your groceries. And we're trying to prevent that as best we can. There's something like millions, like 3 million businesses. Those aren't all grocery stores, but like 3 million businesses that are owned by baby boomers. And baby boomers are retiring at like 80,000 a week. So, like, it's urgent that in the next 10 years, we will see a lot of businesses hopefully go through transition and not close, that the communities wouldn't lose all these businesses. So, anyways, that's just a little bit about the program. I wonder how did you learn that the pilot was going on? How did you get into that process to apply to be a part of that?
Yeah, it was a natural connection. So Kathy Drager has been leading RSDP for a number of years and the Rural Grocery Initiative that we've been working with for, I believe, about 6, 7 years now. So Minnesota has sent out a survey to about 243 of the rural grocery stores. We've got a lot of really great responses from about 140 or so, and learned a ton about the needs of rural grocery. So we've been working together, supporting the rural grocery stores in Minnesota for a while. So then when I came in, we learned, and then Kathy and Greg and people on our team knew about the great work that Kansas State
Hmm.
has been doing, and the Rural Grocery Initiative. So they're kind of keyed into the program. So they sent it to me like, "Hey Zach, you should take this course."
Well, because aren't
Um,
there multiple directors? Like they're like you're for one region and there's multiple of you essentially, like for the different regions.
um, I'm less of, or I'm not a executive director of the region, but I'm like working with Sustainable Ag and Food Systems. But there are executive directors in each region for RSDP. And yeah, actually one of the takeaways after going to the course, and also just like the direction that we've talked about internally about the direction of our how we want to help stores, is after taking the course, kind of rolling out some of the education learned there to the different regions. So that might be part of our strategy moving forward, um, to train in anybody that has some time with RSDP. It seems like we're getting some new hires, so there's some potential of just more people knowing the general basics of like what we went over at the course. So like
Yeah.
what store managers are going through, kind of how to talk to them, how to navigate, and then yeah, if they're kind of feeling they're getting in over their head, and a store has a lot of different problems and things to work out, we'll also have like a cheat sheet, 1 page, or a list of resources to go to. And then yeah, we're kind of thinking of maybe having trainings throughout the state on just what all those resource items are. So then if a store's in their region, so say it's like southwest, it's far
Mhm.
from me, all the way down to the southwest corner of the state. Um, the southwest region they might, if the store reached out to them, or they reached out to the store, or they knew they're having trouble,
Yeah.
um, they might know more of the business centers and some of the resources in that region. So that's part of the strategy, is like everybody kind of knows their region and the assets around them. And then yeah, there's just general good info to know about where to get funding. One of the really great funds that Minnesota has is something called the Good Food Access Program. Um, it started about maybe like 8 years ago. I'm not sure exactly, but I actually wrote a grant for that mobile grocery store in White Earth with that fund the first year. and we were awarded the most amount out of any grants. We were awarded 40,000, and at that time the fund was pretty small. I think we got like a quarter of the money almost. But from that humble beginning, over the years, the fund, and I mean, it's such a needed fund that they realize that they're getting many, many applicants, and there's many rural grocery stores that are in need for improving their infrastructure. So that's what the fund has always been about. It's increasing infrastructure for holding healthy foods, culturally appropriate foods, fruits and vegetables. So if you can increase your fruits and vegetables and healthy foods, then and you're a grocery store, you're eligible. And it's a really great fund that not every state. It's really great that Minnesota has this, and I think yeah, every state should have something like that. And it got into the legislature last year. It was at 300,000 um for everybody to apply, and now it's at close to 1 million. So just in 1 year, with some surplus in the budget, we were able to increase that and advocate for it. And we see the maximum grant amount go from 25,000 to 75,000 now. So yeah, people that really need that fund, like I'm working with a few grocery stores that like they're like, I came in, I bought the store, and we put in a couple 100,000 to fix the flooring,
Yeah.
and now we've got this problem. Um, and we don't have anything left,
Yeah.
basically. So yeah, it's a really needed, yeah, I can't emphasize that enough that um, people are coming into grocery stores that already needed a lot of help. A lot of times the new business owner will recognize that right away and cover those bases and put up a lot of money right away. I've seen that. And then they're almost like tapped out for that next problem that might happen. So that might be 2 to 5 years later. They're like, our coolers are 60 years old and we're just burning through energy.
Yeah.
So another thing we're able to kind of offer is with another University of Minnesota group, pollution control agency called MinTap. They're able to come to a store and provide a free energy audit. Um, and they're working towards working even more collaboratively with us. They've already went to over 10 stores and have done that. We've connected the stores with them, and they're really happy to get out into the community and do that. So that's another great connection point. And yeah, there's just like there's kind of endless ways, like as you know, like to help stores because there's endless problems where everybody's got a unique situation. And the course was really great to learn about the not only store transition and what people are going through personally, but also um, to learn about the resources that could be potentially provided to people if they're looking to transition, like what type of business might you want to be. We've seen stores uh I've seen stores take on different business structures to be able to get over hard times, where like a community buys the store and then they buy it back and stuff like that. Or that's where I'm like my co-op brain goes, but I never want to say too much because the co-op's not for everybody and you need tons of community support and time for that. But where like what you're saying before about how people are struggling with transition and how much transition is happening right now, that goes back to my mantra of like adaptability. It's like you gotta like you almost have to be thinking about this, right? Like 5, 10, 15, 20 years before it happens. And yeah, like we all know, we all kind of put off, the end of our lives or like the hard things, like the end of our business. And um there is this strong tendency to avoid hard hard things in our life. So I think we were saying in one of our sessions, like we're almost like grocery therapists, where we're really, you know,
Yeah.
it's like a child, the business, right? It's like it's a part of your family. So
Yeah. It's a lot to
it's
leave
rough.
behind for these
Yeah.
owners. And to your point that like it's scary, it's sad, I don't know what's on the other side of it, so now I'm avoiding it. And I mean, the experts in transition planning quote that it takes 3 to 5 years to do the transition, and that's once you start. So, like, I mean, there are so many business owners that this is part of where the program came from was a survey in Kansas, similar to what you described that you guys did in Minnesota, where basically there was something like 40%, I want to say, of the grocers in Kansas, the independently owned grocery stores, 40% of their owners are wanting to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. And of those 40%, 80% don't have a plan, haven't even started. So like that's alarming. That's like 40% of Kansas grocery stores are headed for this transition and nobody's making sure that we're building a bridge over there so that it doesn't like fall off the cliff. And so, yeah, that's where the program starts is what we call grocery transition psychology 101. It's like, let's first get into the mind of the person who can't face this, the owner who doesn't even want to think about it. And now you're going to show up as the transition specialist and try to get them to think about it. Like, what is that challenge really? Like, what are you really up against? And I think it really does come down to like it's a huge identity shift for them to have to make to like you're not going to be a business owner potentially. I mean, they could go on and open a different kind of business, but it's a big change for a group of people who are typically owning their stores for decades. Like it's like this has been my whole
Yeah.
life and leaving that behind is not a simple little thing. Like we want the business to transition, but for them, it's like this huge life change. So that's where we start. But it does get into where can you get funding? What are federal, state, local
Yeah.
options? Like what are community assets? What are different business ownership models? How do you value a business? How do you correct a business valuation? These are all the different
Yeah.
tools in your toolbox, if you will, that we try to put in the specialist's hands. And then really the role of the specialist is to be that relationship with the
Hmm.
grocer. And so I love that you're going to try to deploy that into the state to the people who are close up, because
Yeah.
like really that's what it's about is like build that relationship with the grocer so they trust you enough to let you guide them through such a scary thing. Um, yeah, grocery transition
Yeah.
psychology 101. Like, who
Yeah.
knew that that's what's really needed? But when you can't face it, I mean, that's denial, that's avoidance, and that's the first
Mm.
stage of the grieving process is that you just can't even go there. And so, yeah, that was how we started off the program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question, maybe like
Yeah.
um so the program, I don't know how much you're involved with writing the program and whatnot, but
I led the
for
effort,
oh,
actually.
well there you go.
Yeah. What do you want
So
to know?
so obviously it's like the perfect program for specialists and people like in my role and
Sure.
people in all sorts of roles in university and like I was saying earlier that someone from one of our economic centers are going to take the course,
Mhm.
which would be great. Is there an arm also or to offer the program to rural grocery um people that are transitioning or like in terms of like the materials provided, like is that like something like the specialists would do themselves to have those like meaningful one-on-one relationships, or is there any course materials like to go out like to the grocers themselves? Like if a grocer like went to Kansas state and was interested in learning about more about transition, like you might have like not everybody um there has time to have that one-on-one with the whole region. So like what would you suggest like for a grocery store to maybe reach out to one of the specialists from the program, or like do you have like resources that go direct to them too?
I think our goal with the specialists is to create a network. There's a map on the website. I'll link it in the description where you can see like a pin where all of the specialists are. And obviously every cohort puts more pins on the map. And so if you're a grocer who wants support, the idea would be that you would contact RGI and say, "Hey, I noticed there's somebody in my state who is one of these specialists. Can you hook me up with them?" And then yes, we will hook you up with them. And then we tried to design the course materials, like the handouts that were uploaded into the program in a way where you could probably print that off or make a copy of it and hand it to the grocer in the moment where like this is the part that they're on. Like
Mhm.
not here's the whole entire enchilada to where they got to like figure it all out and now they're swimming in an overwhelming amount of information, like where you can just give them the one piece that they're ready for and kind of piece it out for them, so to speak. But I will
Yeah.
say this first cohort in January, we have two members at least. I think it was two last time I looked. There might be more than that that are actual grocers. So like they are in a store themselves and like wanting to take the course. So like that's an option too. But then you're spending your time and like not
Yeah.
everybody has that amount of capacity. So it's kind of whatever they have access for. But that's where it came from was like RGI getting all of these requests
Mm.
for support. And it's like that's a team of three people. So we
Yeah.
need more resources. And so how do
It,
we deploy our knowledge and, technical skills? How do we put it into the heads and hands of that many more people? And so
yeah.
we had 8 people graduate from the pilot last year. There's 16, I think, in the cohort this spring, and we're doing 3 cohorts, like I said, in
Nice.
2024. So
Do they
yeah, and
change throughout, or like if I wanted to take a course again, or if somebody wanted like an alumni, like are there like a part two or different, or is it fully
that's
centered
in
around
the
the one
works.
course right now? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the goal is that essentially like rural grocery specialist would be like the overarching theme of we're deploying resources to support rural grocery stores.
Hmm.
But this first program was for business transition. And
Yeah.
so that's the only one of these that we have so far, but we're already brainstorming and looking for funding about like what are the other credentials, like this one is for business transition, maybe eventually there's one for co-ops and then there's one for
Yeah.
this and that and then if somebody did want to take part 2, it's not a repeat, you're getting a whole new immersive experience into whatever that subject would be, but that's all a work
Yeah.
in progress as we build those. Yeah.
So last question,
Yeah.
like what have you or who have you seen show up, and then also who would you like to see, or like to be a specialist, like so for instance, like I saw like a lot of university extension
Hmm.
types in the program. I'm now learning that people from economic development centers are learning about the program. Have there been any surprising people take the program in roles that you didn't expect? And then also like, do you think like there are particular like positions like someone part of like a grocers association, or like something that they could have that strategic level of influence, take the program so they could understand to potentially get more money out or something? Like, are there any strategies in terms of like who takes the course and outreach there from your end on like, because I got an email, I think, asking, us, like University of Minnesota Extension. So like, are those emails and things are strategically placed to places where you think would be a good fit? And then like, yeah, like who would
Like
you like to see
hoping
in the
that
future?
they'll forward it and like, that you guys
Yeah.
would know about places that we don't even know about. And yes, to your point, I think when we were building the program, we had the target audience as like extension and eco devo. Like those are the people that make the most sense, most accessible for us to think about.
What's
They're all over
eco
the US. What's that?
devo?
Eco devo,
What's
economic development.
oh
Eco devo. Yeah. And but I will say that this time there is at least one that comes to mind that is not either of those things. It's a specific organization that is very like sustainable ag, kind of like community. I can't even remember the name of it, but it was like that was kind of the mission of their organization. And so they found their way to the program. Um, and yeah, I think as we go, this time we didn't, I mean, knock on wood, like we didn't have to sell it very hard to get 16 people into the cohort. So like that was a really good sign that like off to a great start. But as we go, yeah, I think we're always open for ideas of like, who do we put this in front of? You know, what kind of a group would be a good fit to deploy these resources into the biggest area possible so that the grocers actually find them? Because while the goal of the program is to train specialists, really the goal of the program is to keep community grocery stores open. So, however, we need to connect with like who would be the best specialist, I think we're always open for ideas on that front and like
Yeah.
forwarding it to our network, hoping that that network will forward it on out to maybe you guys know of people that we don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like
Definitely.
your idea though of like the grocery warehouses and like, because that's, you know, the transition specialists and the grocery warehouses, the people that you would think like are the resource holders that the grocer would call and like, hey, I'm doing this, I'm transitioning, I need help. And,
They
you
don't have
know,
the time. Yeah.
they are right. The warehouse doesn't really have the time, typically, is what we hear. And the
Yeah, because
transition
they're
specialist, it's like the stories that we heard was like they're putting on community events and then nobody comes. And it's like
mm,
transition is such a personal thing that like until you're actually living it, until you're ready for it, it's
yeah.
not one of those things that you're going to take up your time to go sit in a 2 hour seminar for something that's like not even on your radar. And so that's
Yeah.
where like the transition specialist came in of like, it really is about having that relationship so that when the grocer's ready, they know exactly who to call to get access into, okay, so what do I do? You know, like
Yeah.
guide me, tell me, lead me. What do I do?
So my pitch would be if you're gonna do a new one and
Mhm.
maybe maybe
I
we'll
like
talk
ideas.
later or something,
Bring it
but
on.
so my pitch is so we got the grocer transition for the
Hmm.
old timers, right? My thought is we need a program to train in the new or the next person because that's what I think that's what I've seen the most. Like there's tons of problems, right, with the people buying a store, the infrastructure, all that. And I guess in Minnesota at least we've got a lot of that not solved, but we've got a lot of pathways. And a lot of states aren't even there. There's no funding. There's no extra funding for infrastructure and stuff like that. But just in terms of like what a grocery store like needs, like we
Yeah.
are a store, we're trying to be profitable, but the floor is damaged and this and that and this. And it's, they need it, next month. So in terms of that, with those kinds of problems, on top of that, like the new management to learn all that, all this the store. And what I think I've like seen a lot in just like a year of talking with dozens of grocery stores is that, and also at the Mana Food Co-op, is that running a grocery store is a very, very specialized um, skill.
Yeah.
And if you don't have some of those attributes like leadership and to manage your staff and knowing about ordering and and also being a strong leader, a confident leader that can say, you know what, no, this product isn't up to quality, and also like to be able to manage staff in the way of, being a disciplinarian, but also being, someone that's, very encouraging. And then on top of all of that, you have to do all the books, and you have to know about product mix, and you have to know about shelving, and you have to know about where you're getting your ingredient, where you're getting your food, um, and truck days and everything. So there's so many arms to a grocery store. My pitch would be a grocery manager training program for for new for the new people coming in. And I wonder
Yeah.
if that's something in the as an idea, but I'm putting you on the
It's
spot at the
no,
podcast. But like what do you think? Like, do you think that's come up before? In terms of like that, the handing of the torch. Okay, we got there, and there's so much that goes into that, right? Like there's worlds within worlds, and that's what this whole program's about, and supporting the stores. And then there's that next step of the next person coming in might never have ran a store before, may never have ran a grocery store. So like
Especially
there's
rural
another world within
communities.
worlds within,
Yes.
that kind of experience. I don't
Yeah.
know. What do you think?
Yeah. So that is a great idea as far as RGI deploying resources. But I will also give you, I'll track down links and put them in the description box if anybody wants to check them out. But there's a program that I created before the transition specialist program. This one is free and it was grant funded. And I made 10 modules that are opening, operating, and optimizing a grocery store. So there's
Oh,
like 12
nice.
hours of video content. There's 48 supporting documents that you can download, customize. Like the documents, especially, I'll say, aren't meant to be like, this is the exact margin that you need to use, but it's a spreadsheet that's already built, and then you change the margin to whatever you want it to be, kind of thing. Like customize it for your operation, whatever works for you. So that's one that's totally free. The other one is a paid option that Jeannie Wells does called Mighty Community Markets. And I believe that one is co-op focused, but it doesn't have to be co-ops that take it. And I don't know the exact price point, but I think she does it a couple times a year. So I'll get the link from her and we can put that one down there too, as far as those are options that exist right now. And RGI, I mean, the goal is to have kind of a series of rural grocery specialists, like resources, courses that can be taken by grocers and by the people who support them.
Hmm.
Because, yeah, it is so much to learn. And I think
Yeah.
some people are drawn to it for that very reason, but still, you need resources to kind of help you avoid some of those costly mistakes that are so easy to make, like over order,
Yeah.
to your point.
And I think that's kind of, yeah. And it's like, oh, yeah, those are really great resources. So yeah, thanks so much for mentioning everything you just did. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think the that's kind of like the maintenance um work, right? Like so that's what I've seen a little bit. Just because, just knowing grocery a little bit, sometimes you walk in a store and you see these things, right? You see shelves not filled or like something like you kind of like um little blinkers in your head of like, and I
Mhm.
remember taking the course and we are kind of,
Like red
we're
flags
red
that
flags.
these
Yep,
are
we had that right.
things that like if you see that there's roots behind
Yep.
why that is happening in the store. And so just to kind of be sensitive with the grocer when you're like, dude, why don't you just fill up your shelf? Because
Yeah,
my
and
cash flow is not allowing me to,
yeah,
there's reasons.
and there's so much to it, like running a store. It's intuitive for a lot of people that thrive in the businesses where they run their own business and they run their own store. Like presentation matters, cleanliness matters, friendliness matters, all of these
Mhm.
things, the service part. And um, yeah, there's no like, it's like one of those things also um, like being an actor or something like that. Like it's either you're born with it to an extent, like you either have these intuitions or you don't in the beginning, and either becoming aware of them or, sometimes not being aware of them. And then, yeah, sometimes like those when you're noticing like a situation where um the management is not optimal and a store is struggling, sometimes it's frustrating, right? Like to be that trying to help, but um someone not being able to see or like trying to solve something in a way that's different than maybe like that would be the most helpful of like just looking at the books and looking where you could save a few bucks here and there, and looking at the day to day. And but sometimes they'll run into a store or a situation where like, well, we should have this idea, and it seems so far out there, and to solve the problem, like getting more funding or this or that. Like I guess in my experience, like having uh, like a lot of the times it seems like the problem is closer to home, right? It's like looking at where you're spending your money, looking at your
Yeah.
P&L statement. Let's look at that. Let's really look at that.
Yeah.
Let's really look at, what's going on with your economics. And I think that sometimes that's personal and that's hard. And
I heard a
to really take
quote
that
here
deep into it.
recently that you're reminding me of. That's it's hard to see the picture when you're in the frame.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
like, I think, where a lot of grocers end up, whether they're ready to transition or they're just starting out or whatever. And maybe it's business owners in general, maybe it's not grocery specific, but when it's our deal that we are living 60, 70 hours a week, like it can be really hard to be objective and be detached
Yeah,
enough to observe, like, what is the real problem here?
yeah,
And that's, one of the things we talk about in the program is like how to have hard conversations with grocers when you see that, like, I think there are things that you could be doing better
yeah,
personally. Like that can be such touchy information to deliver to somebody. And yet, if that's really what they need to address to heal their business, like, in the long run, they're probably going to be glad somebody told them.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you think like that it's like the landscape of grocers, like managers, is a little bit like a free for all in the sense of like, if you're gonna be a car mechanic or something like that, there's actually like college or there's actually like credited courses that you could take to like gain a skill to do a position. Whereas like with grocery stores, like I wonder if we're at this point where like so many grocery stores are struggling and there's so many problems that could be solved by simple management. And it's not simple, but like management alone helps. Do you think like that it ever could be an idea to have like a more regulatory aspect to like becoming a grocery store manager where like because it's so like uh such an important part of the food system, if we're losing a lot of stores due to potentially, poor management in one way or another, that's it's just one factor, but it is a factor that, it's like I was saying before, there's so much that goes into managing a grocery store. It's different than other businesses, and there's so much there. Um, because of that factor alone, like, do you think like that could ever be a good idea to like I don't know if it looks like regulation or just like something like a very, very strongly encouraged like course for grocers across the country to take. Like it's not something that I've like heard much about, or I don't know if you've thought about that at all, or if that's maybe a create like people don't like regulation generally, so maybe that's a horrible idea,
Well,
but
and
what are your thoughts
especially in
on that?
rural places, like I hate to see anything that raises the bar to entry because it's already so freaking high, like with how much it costs to buy a store, how much you invest, like all of that. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like I definitely hear what you're saying of like when we do see businesses in general
Maybe it
fail,
wouldn't have to cost so like serve safe certification. What is that? Like $50. But then you
sure,
train all your employees to learn how to not, spread disease when you're cooking stuff in a restaurant.
right.
So something along those lines. I mean, that's like a 20-hour course. It's not going to
Yeah,
break the bank and it's not
yeah.
going to take your staff too
Should
long to
there be
learn.
something? Yeah, I think so. Like, and so that's where RGI, like, I think part of the bigger picture, long game perspective is something around, like I said, it's only a team of three people. One of them is part-time and fielding requests from grocers and like having the same conversation with grocers over and over and over again. Like that eats up a big chunk of like what they're able to do in a year. And the idea, if we don't have to field those requests, we can say, actually, you're in Minnesota. Zachary's in Minnesota. Let me hook you up with Zachary. He can totally walk you through this. And now we're back off the phone and we're ready to move on to the next thing. And so, hopefully, by training more people and having more of these technical resources in the field, that lets RGI focus on those bigger picture opportunities of like what would move the needle forward? Like, how do we keep grocers as healthy as possible? Because truly, like, the whole point of RGI is healthy food access. Like, that's all we want is that, there's already enough food deserts in the world, and every time a grocery store closes, well, maybe not every time, but a lot of times when a grocery store closes, you're creating a new one. And so combating food deserts, combating people like communities that don't have access, like it's such a it's a monumental task. It's like David and Goliath over here. And RGI is like delivering such phenomenal support. But how do we leverage? How do we leverage that knowledge and scale across as many places as we can? And to your point, I think this series of what other trainings could be developed is definitely where we're headed. Of like, yes, those will exist in time. And until then, hopefully the specialists, hopefully extension, hopefully whoever it is that is in those communities can at least like hook them up with the resources that they have available to them.
Yeah.
Mm. I feel like we
Well,
could talk about rural grocery and food
yeah,
systems
we
and
should.
co-ops
Yeah,
for days and days and days, but that feels like a good place to end it. What do you think? Was there anything else you
sounds
wanted to
great.
touch
Yeah,
on
no,
there before we jump off?
I guess just I did have one quick one just about like if there's anything in the works that you see about like um funding, like that's because it all comes down to dollars and cents with grocery stores and how much, they might be able to squeeze out of either a federal or a state budget. Like, are there any ideas about any national grocers efforts or things in the federal or regional level? I know all about Minnesota, but like, are there any things that would be helpful for anybody to know about, like any movement or any opportunities with that space?
I am not plugged into it, but I am hoping to have the RGI people, ladies is what I usually call them, but people on the show soon. And so I will definitely ask them that question and again, put some links in the description that people can follow to learn more about that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. Hopefully,
Yeah.
fingers crossed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe something some of the specialists and leaders in the space might want to look at if we ever hear about something with food access. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but like say
Yeah.
there's a funding opportunity that comes up that looks like um grocery specialists or even just, maybe being some of the people that could handle, some amount of support through I don't know what that looks like at all, but just in terms of just what we all know as the the greater need for grocery stores is, some financial support at the end of the day,
Yeah.
or
Well,
whatever, might be crumbling infrastructure might be the most obvious for a lot of stores that are 50 years or older, in small towns. So yeah, if there's ever that kind of opportunity, that'd be great to key in.
well, and let me just invite if you ever see anything or anybody
Yeah.
listening sees anything on this topic of funding that's like, even if maybe RGI already knows about it, I don't think it hurts at all to send a note to rgi@ksu.edu to
Yeah.
say like, hey, I just wanted to make sure you have this option on your radar that you can be recommending that out to people. So that's where RGI definitely is tapped into a lot of great networks. And so they hear about a lot of things, but it doesn't hurt
Yeah.
anything for everyone to be on the lookout and then, sending it into that central hub of like,
Yeah.
even though they are located at Kansas State, they get phone calls from all over the country, sometimes not even in the country. So, yeah, thank you
Yeah,
for
because
forwarding what you find.
like even like looking up that good food access program, like that's something we were able to get pretty solidly into the Minnesota budget. So even something
Yeah.
like that, like maybe something even I could help or someone from Minnesota could help, like Iowa reaches out and says, I work with the government in Iowa. We want a program like that. So like maybe there's some sharing of information that we could work towards to like build that financial capacity up to, I don't know, just
Yeah.
putting it out there.
Absolutely. Well, and you're so right that like that's really what it comes down to in the razor thin margins. Like there's just not extra money floating inside of a grocery store typically. And so to
Yeah.
do any of those like reinvestments, it really does help to have those outside sources available. And then it's a matter of
Yeah.
like getting it in front of the grocer, the person who actually needs the money. So,
Yeah. And that's a
mm,
funds too. You probably know about the reinvestment funds that you're just
oh, see, I feel like we're going to have like a whole list of links in the description box for this
yeah.
episode, which is great because we also just had the kickoff for the cohort that's going through the program right now. And they were like, what resources can you share? Like, how do we dive more into this? And so they pointed them towards My Grocery Adventure podcast. So hopefully they find this episode and all the links in the description. Might forward it out to the specialist network too, because yeah, we definitely hit on some things that, yeah,
Yeah.
very relatable in grocery in general, no matter what state you're in, finding funding is typically difficult. And just going through the various states that were represented in the pilot, we saw that like there are states that have options and there are states that have none. So, yeah, being able to find those federal options where everyone can plug into this, it doesn't matter what state you're in, those are really like the golden egg that we're looking for of like not state specific funding, but really take anything. We're trying to build as much of a database around that kind of thing as we possibly can. So, thank you for
Nice.
the ones that you've mentioned, and we'll link them down below and make sure RGI has those on their radar. Um, this has been great. Very practical, helpful discussion. So, Zachary, thank you so much for spending the
Yeah.
time to educate us with all of your passions on food systems and co-ops, all the things. Oh, um, yeah, thank you again, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much. Take a second, like the episode, leave us a comment down below, whichever part you found most interesting, most helpful. Maybe you had an idea that got sparked by something we talked about today. I would love to hear about it down below. Until next time, I hope you will take really good care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, bye.
Thanks, Carly.